A man. After a life-shattering accident, he must fight for his family's survival and their future. A woman. At the brink of death, she clings to life in the hands of a stranger. A couple. Struggling through financial hardships and endless losses, they search for a glimmer of hope for their child. As Owen prepares to sell the last remaining piece of his family's legacy, fate challenges him with an unexpected test. Accidents, coincidences, and life-changing decisions. All of them converge, bringing their stories together at a crucial moment. Owen had been working at an auto repair company in a big city when he had an unfortunate accident at work. A faulty machine, either due to carelessness or defective equipment, went out of control and seriously fractured his arm. After the accident, his face turned pale from the pain, and they had to call for emergency assistance. However, the real nightmare began after he got out of the hospital. The company he worked for refused to take responsibility, denying that the accident was due to any safety negligence. They quickly conducted an internal investigation and reported the incident as Owen's own fault. Before he had even recovered, Owen found out he was being fired. His boss, with a cold demeanor, told him that he was no longer capable of working because of his injury. When Owen tried to stand up for himself, the company's attitude turned even harsher. Thinking of taking this to court? His boss had asked mockingly. Don't bother. It'll take years and the lawyer fees will ruin you. Trust me, it's not worth it. Those words echoed in Owen's mind, crushing his pride. Even though he knew he was in the right, he felt powerless. He couldn't get a new job while his arm was still healing. To make matters worse, a new responsibility weighed heavily on his shoulders. His wife, Rachel, was pregnant and they were going through tough times. Rachel started looking for work to support Owen. She managed to get a job as a waitress at a restaurant in the city, but the fatigue from her pregnancy and the fast-paced environment began to take a toll on her health. One day she collapsed at work. After being rushed to the doctor, she was advised to stop working altogether. With both of them out of work, their hopes began to dwindle. As Owen grappled with the overwhelming situation, he tried to think of another solution. That's when he remembered the small farmhouse his father had left him in his hometown. It was one of the last remaining pieces of his family's legacy. He had never once considered selling it before. In fact, he had dreamed of one day returning to that place with Rachel and their children to start a peaceful life. But now, survival left him with no other choice. Owen's arm had healed, but the debts were piling up and Rachel's due date was fast approaching. They urgently needed money, there was no time to search for a job. On top of that, they required a large lump sum to get through this period. Selling the house seemed like the most reasonable decision under the circumstances. The money from the sale would provide them with some financial security, and once they returned to the city, Owen would have time to focus on finding work again. Reluctantly, Owen set the plan into motion. Though it wasn't what he wanted, it was the only way to keep their family afloat. A few buyers had shown interest in the farmhouse. Owen had listed it for sale online, and some people from outside the town had responded to the ad. He scheduled appointments with each of them for that week. The thought of selling the house weighed heavily on his heart. It was his father's legacy, filled with the fondest memories of his childhood. He didn't want to part with it, but they had no other choice. He had to support his family and keep them afloat. Rachel was seeing the house for the first time. When they arrived, she stepped inside the small farmhouse Owen had spoken of so often in his childhood stories. It had a warm, homey feel to it. The house's old structure, wooden floors, and large fireplace gave it a rustic charm. Despite its simplicity, Rachel could sense the peaceful atmosphere. After the chaos of city life, the fresh air of the countryside felt refreshing. Still, the thought of having to sell this beautiful home saddened her as well. Outside, snow had begun to fall gently. The flakes silently melted as they touched the window panes. Rachel made some hot coffee for Owen while he arranged the firewood in the fireplace. As he lit the fire, he drifted deep into thought. The exhaustion was etched across his face. Rachel understood how much the situation was upsetting him. She tried to stay strong and hide her own emotions to support him. As she placed the coffee on the table, she spoke in a cheerful tone. I guess this place is just like you described. But living here might be tough, she said with a soft smile. Being so far from all the conveniences of the city isn't exactly my style. Owen picked up his coffee and looked at her. He could tell that she didn't mean what she said. He knew she was just trying to lift his spirits. But it wasn't hard to see the peace and connection Rachel felt in this place reflected in her eyes. The next day, the first buyer arrived, making his way through the snow-covered roads to the farmhouse. Owen welcomed him and gave a full tour of the house, showing every corner. He pointed out the sturdy old wooden structure, the spacious yard, and a few rooms that held memories from his childhood. The man nodded with subtle approval as he examined the details, clearly impressed. However, by the end of the tour, a hesitant expression appeared on his face. "This house is really beautiful, even more peaceful than I imagined," the man said politely. "But getting here was more difficult than I expected. The roads are quite rough and challenging. I was hoping to use this place as a weekend retreat for my family, but the access issue might be a big problem for me." Owen immediately understood that the buyer was likely going to back out. "I see," he replied calmly. The man glanced around the property for a moment longer before saying his goodbyes and leaving. Owen watched as the buyer's car disappeared down the road, letting out a deep sigh. A wave of disappointment washed over him. Receiving a negative response from the buyer only intensified his sense of helplessness. After a while, Rachel came over and immediately noticed his somber mood. Standing beside him, she spoke in a warm and supportive tone. "Don't be discouraged, sweetheart," she said with a reassuring smile. "You still have 3 more buyers to meet. This place is really special. I'm sure someone who doesn't want to miss out on it will come along." Owen gave a small nod and silently sipped his coffee. Rachel could sense the deep sadness hidden beneath his silence, but she didn't press him further. She knew he needed time alone with his thoughts in moments like this. Just then the phone rang. Owen set down his cup and answered it. It was the buyer who had just left. "Hi, sorry to bother you," the man said, sounding a bit anxious. "I just left town but my car broke down. I think it's because of the snow. You mentioned you were a mechanic. Could you take a look? Or maybe give me the number for a local repair shop?" Owen took a deep breath and replied without hesitation, "No problem. I'll be right there." He grabbed his toolbox and headed out. The snow was still falling lightly, and the weight of it bent the branches of the trees along the road. As he walked in the peaceful silence, Owen's mind wandered to memories of his childhood spent on these very paths. He found the buyer's car parked on the roadside. The hood was open and steam was rising from the engine. Owen approached and began examining the situation. "Let's see what's going on here," he said, rolling up his sleeves. Within a few minutes he had identified the problem. "It's a simple issue," Owen said after finishing the repair. "But I'd still recommend getting it checked by a service shop." The man sighed in relief and thanked him sincerely. "I really appreciate it. I don't know what I would have done without your help," he said gratefully. They exchanged farewells, wishing each other safe travels before parting ways. As Owen drove along the narrow, snow-covered town road, a sudden glare of light caught his eyes, momentarily blinding him. He squinted, trying to see clearly, but the flash quickly disappeared. Moments later, he noticed a faint column of smoke rising in the distance. A sense of dread washed over him. He immediately pulled his vehicle over to the side of the road and stepped out. Peering carefully down the embankment, he spotted a wrecked car buried in the snow. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath. The car had rolled down the slope and smashed into a large rock before coming to a stop. Without hesitation, Owen grabbed his toolbox and began making his way down the snowy incline. The steep, slippery terrain made it difficult to maintain his footing, but he pushed forward, quickening his pace. His breath turned to steam in the icy air, surrounding his face as he exhaled. When he reached the vehicle, the severity of the situation became clear. The car was badly crushed, but the airbags had deployed. In the driver's seat, he saw a woman lying motionless. Blood had trickled from a wound on her head, and although the bleeding had stopped, her face was pale and lifeless. Owen tried to open the door, but it was jammed. "Come on. Come on," he muttered in frustration, struggling with the handle to no avail. He scanned the car and noticed that the trunk was slightly ajar. He ran to the back, opened the trunk, and found a fire extinguisher inside. Determined, he moved to the side window and shattered it with a strong blow. Glass shards scattered over the snow as Owen climbed into the back seat, moving toward the woman. He checked her pulse, weak but present. She was alive. Owen let out a sigh of relief. He reached for his phone to call 911, but the screen wouldn't turn on. The battery was completely dead. "Perfect timing," he muttered sarcastically. He realized he had no choice but to handle the situation himself. The woman's seatbelt was tightly fastened. Owen pulled out his pocket knife and cut it. Supporting her head and neck, he carefully began to move her. The front door wouldn't budge from the inside either. With a swift kick, he managed to loosen it slightly, but it still didn't fully open. He climbed out, gave the door one final tug, and finally wrenched it open with all his strength. Time was working against him. Gently but urgently, Owen lifted the woman into his arms, making sure her head and neck were secure. Though he had rushed downhill earlier, climbing back up through the slippery snow was a much harder task. His feet slipped and his breath came in short, frosty puffs, but he didn't stop. Step by step, he pressed on until he reached the road. Once he made it to his car, Owen carefully laid the woman across the back seat and covered her with a blanket. He shut the door and quickly got into the driver's seat. The road conditions were still difficult, but he gripped the steering wheel tightly and kept his eyes focused with determination. He drove cautiously but swiftly toward the town's emergency clinic. Every minute felt like an hour, but finally the lights of the small town hospital came into view. Owen exhaled deeply as he pulled up to the emergency entrance. He jumped out of the car and shouted for help. Medical staff hurried out to meet him. "There was an accident," Owen explained quickly. "She rolled off the road in her car. She's got a pulse but she's unconscious." The paramedics wasted no time placing the woman on a stretcher. As they carried her inside, Owen stood by, finally feeling the exhaustion catch up with him. He ran a hand through his hair and took another deep breath. Watching the medical team rush the woman through the hospital doors, he knew his race against time had paid off. She was safe now. Owen didn't want to leave the hospital without knowing the woman's condition. After waiting for a while, a doctor from the emergency room came to the front desk. Owen quickly approached him. "Doctor, the woman from the accident. How is she? Is she in any serious danger?" he asked anxiously. The doctor gave a slight nod. "She took a hard hit to the head. Right now she's unconscious and we're still conducting detailed tests. However, for the moment her condition is stable. It's too early to say more. If you'd like, you can leave your phone number and we'll keep you updated. You look pretty exhausted yourself." Owen thought for a moment. "You're right," he said before turning to the front desk and leaving his number with the receptionist. "Please let me know if there are any updates on her condition," he requested. The receptionist noted down his details and nodded reassuringly. At that moment, Owen noticed a pain he hadn't been aware of until now. There was a dull ache in his arm. He winced slightly and held it as he turned to the doctor. "Actually, my arm was broken a while ago. It's just healed, but I think there might be a problem," he admitted. The doctor raised an eyebrow. "Let's take a look," he said, guiding Owen to an examination room. After checking Owen's arm, the doctor ordered an X-ray. Once the results came in, the doctor reviewed them and spoke. "It looks like a minor sprain. Since the bone is still freshly healed, it's more sensitive than usual. It's normal to have an incident like this," he explained with an understanding expression. "You'll need to rest your arm for a few days. We'll put it in a temporary cast." Owen let out a soft sigh and smiled faintly. "All right, I guess I have no choice, huh?" he said patiently. The doctor applied the cast and gave him a few instructions. "If the pain gets worse, make sure to come back for a checkup. Try not to strain your arm too much," he advised. Owen thanked him and left the room. Before leaving the hospital, he stopped by the front desk one more time to thank the staff, then headed to his car and drove back toward the farmhouse. His thoughts lingered on the accident and the woman as he navigated the snowy roads. He felt as though something in his life was beginning to align, as if he were on the right path. When he finally reached the farmhouse, Rachel met him at the door. "Is everything okay? Did something happen?" she asked with concern. "I came across an accident," Owen explained. "I got the woman to the hospital. My arm's acting up a little, but it's nothing serious. It'll just be in a cast for a few days. Don't worry, I'm fine," he added, his face showing both exhaustion and relief. Rachel invited him inside and went to the kitchen to prepare a warm drink. Owen sank into a chair by the fireplace, closing his eyes for a moment. Everything that had happened reminded him that life was always full of new challenges. But this time he had Rachel by his side and that made things a little easier. Owen jolted awake at the sound of Rachel's pained groan in the early hours of the morning. His eyes shot open and he jumped out of bed in a panic. "Rachel, what's wrong?" he asked, his voice filled with worry. Rachel wiped the sweat from her forehead, struggling to speak. "I think the contractions have started." "Oh, Owen, my water just broke." For a moment, Owen froze in shock, then snapped into action. Okay. I'm getting everything ready," he said quickly as he rushed outside to prepare the car. The baby was coming. After helping Rachel carefully into the car, Owen took the driver's seat and drove carefully but swiftly toward the hospital. The snow was beginning to melt on the town roads as he navigated toward the emergency department, his mind swirling with a mix of emotions. When they arrived, Rachel was immediately taken to the delivery room. Owen gave the doctors a brief update before being asked to wait outside. He knew they would call him to be by Rachel's side soon, but for now he wasn't allowed in the room. After pacing for a bit, Owen decided to head to the cafeteria to get some ice chips for Rachel. As he walked past the reception desk, one of the staff members noticed him and smiled. "Ah, sir. I was just about to call you," the receptionist said. "The woman you brought in yesterday is doing well. She'll need to stay under observation for a few more days, but she's out of danger. Thanks to you, she's safe." Owen let out a deep breath, feeling a wave of relief. "That's great news. Please send her my best wishes," he said, thanking the receptionist before continuing to the cafeteria. While getting ice chips, Owen's phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. Thinking it might be a potential buyer for the house, he answered. "Hello, may I speak with Owen?" a polite woman's voice asked. "You're speaking to him," Owen replied quickly. "But I'm in the middle of an emergency right now. Could you call me back later?" There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "Hello? Hello?" Owen repeated, thinking the signal had dropped. Just then he noticed a woman approaching him from across the cafeteria. She walked toward him and gently tapped his shoulder. "Owen?" she said, looking both surprised and uncertain. Owen turned around and his eyes widened in shock. Standing before him was the woman he had rescued from the car crash the previous day. "Is that you?" he asked, still processing what he was seeing. The woman nodded, equally astonished. "Yes, it's me. I was looking for you to thank you." Owen gave a small smile. "Oh, it's nothing. Anyone would have done the same." She shook her head with a grateful expression. "It's kind of you to say that, but if you hadn't saved me, I wouldn't be here." Owen shrugged modestly but glanced toward the hallway with urgency. "I'm really sorry, but I'm in a bit of a hurry. My wife is in labor," he explained. The woman smiled warmly. "I understand. I hope everything goes well. Good luck." "Thank you," Owen replied before taking the ice chips and quickly making his way toward the delivery room. His steps were purposeful, but his heart was filled with a mixture of nervousness and calm. Every challenge, every coincidence had led him to this moment. Now he was walking toward the miracle that awaited him. After hours of waiting, the miracle finally happened. A sweet, healthy baby girl was born. She had arrived earlier than expected, but the doctors assured them everything was fine. Rachel couldn't hold back her tears. Owen embraced her, gazing into her eyes. The magic of the moment filled them both with deep peace and excitement. Rachel's voice trembled as she spoke. "Owen, what are we going to do? We have no money. I thought we still had a month. I was hoping the house would sell by then." Owen gently held her, comforting her with a reassuring tone. "Hey, we'll be okay. Don't worry, I'll figure something out," he said confidently. Due to the cast on his arm, Owen couldn't hold the baby yet. Rachel tilted her head slightly and looked at him. "So, what should we name her?" she asked. Owen thought for a moment. "I don't know. We only just found out we were having a girl. But this is exactly what we wanted, isn't it?" he said with a warm smile. At that moment, someone at the door quietly witnessed the emotional scene. It was Hannah, who had overheard their conversation by accident. She softly knocked and stepped inside with a bouquet of flowers. Trying not to make it obvious she had heard anything, she approached them with a kind smile. "Hello," she said gently. "I hope I'm not intruding. I just wanted to congratulate you." She placed the flowers on the bedside table. "I'm Hannah. Your husband saved me from that terrible accident yesterday. Thanks to him, I'm alive." Rachel, surprised but polite, responded, "Oh, it's nice to meet you. I'm so glad you're okay." Hannah then turned to Owen. "Could I speak with you outside for a moment?" she asked. Owen exchanged a brief glance with Rachel before stepping out with Hannah. As they walked down the corridor, Hannah spoke, her voice filled with curiosity and concern. "I overheard a little. It sounds like you're going through a rough time. What's going on?" she asked. Owen hesitated for a moment before summarizing the situation. "I had a work accident and the company unfairly fired me. We've been struggling financially, but don't worry. We'll be fine. Our baby is healthy and that's all that matters," he said. Hannah gave him a grateful look. "Thank you again for saving my life." "I owe you everything," she said softly. After exchanging farewells, she left. Later, as it came time to leave the hospital, Owen and Rachel were preparing to go when the receptionist approached them with an envelope. Inside was a check. Owen stared at it in shock and looked at the receptionist. "What's this?" he asked. The receptionist smiled. "Sir, this is from Miss Hannah. She left it for you before she departed. She also paid for any hospital expenses not covered by insurance. She wanted me to pass on her thanks." Owen took the check, astonished. The amount was significant. But, "This is too much," he exclaimed. The receptionist chuckled softly. "Miss Hannah owns a large company. She felt indebted to you." "I'm sure it's not a problem for her," she explained. Owen and Rachel stared at each other in stunned silence. After a moment, Rachel took a deep breath and spoke calmly but firmly. "Owen, I want to live here. I want to stay in this town." Owen smiled knowingly. "I figured. You told me you didn't like it here, but I knew you were just saying that to make me feel better." Rachel laughed softly. "Yeah. I've fallen in love with this place." Looking down at their sleeping baby girl, Rachel smiled sweetly and said, "Let's name her Hannah." Owen gazed at his daughter, his voice filled with emotion. "I can't think of a better name." A week later, Owen found Hannah's contact information and gave her a call. On the phone, he thanked her and said, "We named our daughter after you." After a brief pause on the other end, Hannah responded warmly, "You saved my life. I hope you and your family are incredibly happy." "Thank you." With hope and excitement for the future, Owen and Rachel started a new chapter of their lives, raising their daughter in the farmhouse. The tough days were behind them. Ahead lay a future filled with love and security. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell to stay updated on new videos. Check out our channel for more exciting stories,